Well, welcome to this thought for the day for the 22nd of May 2020. As you all know, we're in the midst of this COVID pandemic crisis around the world, but do, it does remind me that it's not the only thing that we as a human race and as a world and creation need to be mindful of or consider. Prior to the COVID crisis, many of us have been uh, raising awareness and protesting and trying to and, insist on government action in regards to perhaps even a bigger crisis that faces us in the next few years. That if we don't take drastic action regarding the way we live and expend energy and produce carbon and other greenhouse gases, we're facing a climate crisis, a climate catastrophe, some would say. That if we don't get a handle of those in the next 10 years, by the end of the century, we will see world temperature increases of up to 3 to 5%, or degrees, sorry, which will mean the end of much of our agriculture and species and things like that. We're already in the largest species extinction event, since we've walked this world, and we need to be mindful of this as well. I know this is a pretty dark topic, but it's something that has been brought to my mind a bit more recently because of the COVID crisis. I've also been listening to an excellent book by Naomi Klein called On Fire, which really brings the reality that we face as really the human race, but also many other species on this planet. That as temperatures change so dramatically in such a short time, where our world doesn't have the time to evolve to meet those challenges, and we'll be facing a possible extinction event, which sounds hyperbolic, but it supposedly is the reality. And I think that's the trouble with the COVID crisis. We can see the reality right here, right now, and therefore it forces us into action on matters such as climate. Well, the effects, the full effects of this are quite some years away yet. But if we don't act now, those effects will be seen. And for some of us, we won't be here to see those full effects, but our children and our grandchildren will definitely feel the brunt of all this. And we can't continue in the way that we have been living and expending the world's energy, particularly those carbon-based energies, which produce the gases, the carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and methane, and all those things that cause the global warming, as it were. But the climate crisis that we face is going to have a huge impact. And I've been thinking, well, what do we as a church, as the people of God, who from the beginning were called to be stewards of this world, to tend it and to nurture it and to help see it flourish, and how we have been derelict in our duties in doing so, largely because we've had theologies that suggest, well, we're only temporarily here. The real thing is about what happens after we die, so don't worry too much about what happens here on earth, which I, being a Franciscan, particularly think is completely irresponsible and anti-biblical. The fact that God so loved the world that he sent his son into it suggests that it's not about just what happens after we die. It's about what we do here and now in this moment on this planet, the only one we've got. And the fact that actually we are all connected, both human beings and all creation. We can't survive without the rest of creation. The other animals, the other species, the fauna, the food crops that we need, all that sort of stuff. We are interdependent upon our brothers and sisters of different species and different living organisms. And we really need to start thinking theologically and what is our response as a church? What, as we, as communities of faithful Christians, how do we seek to respond to such a crisis that we have created? There are some fantastic ideas out there, such as reducing our dependence on foods and things that require shipping from long distances, developing more local community cooperatives in order to meet the needs of everyone at a much more local level. Also, it gives us opportunity in this time as the world has slowed down a little bit. But to put it in perspective, since the COVID crisis has happened, the world's energy consumption and CO2 gas emissions have only really reduced by about 4%. And if the lockdown continues for the full year, we're only looking at about 7%. Really, what we need to be doing is reducing them by at least 50%. That just puts it in perspective. So this is like, as one scientist said, it's like you're filling a bath and you've just turned the tap down a little so the water isn't flowing quite as quickly as it was before. Yet it's still flowing and it will overflow the bath at some point. So it really is a sobering thought for us as a Christian community, a faith community, as to what's our role and what can we model. We have a real opportunity in these times to help set the agenda and to really think about these things from a faith perspective, because the Christian faith is all about human flourishing and living life and life abundantly. And in many ways, what we're doing regarding the climate is actually cutting ourselves off from the source of life, which is Christ. Christ sustains all and is all. In Christ we have our being. We can't exist outside of the life-giving force of Christ. We see that in John's Gospel, where he talks about if you're not part of the vine, then the branch is dead. And we're very much walking into a way, if we don't change things, where we're cutting ourselves off from the very essence of life itself. And in a sense, cutting ourselves off from God through Christ. So as a Christian community, perhaps we need to start looking at how we, on a local level, can develop a means by which to support people on a sustainable and less impactful way. But individual action isn't going to cut it. It does need to be a global thing. So therefore, maybe we as Christians and faithful Christians need to consider the international organizations we have that have been ecumenical, such as the World Council of Churches and things like that, or the European Council of Churches, to mobilize those things, those organizations, to strengthen the voice for global responses to these things. because it's only as us as a whole human race are we going to be able to tackle them. And it is really an opportunity for us as the church universal to go against what we've done over the last 2,000 years and change things and help set the agenda of how we live together in flourishing communities across the world. Just another thought for the day, really. I'm sorry that the last couple of thoughts have been a little bit on the darker side, but it's an opportunity for us to sit back and think, well, how can we impact and be part of the conversation, but not just conversation, but actually actively part of the solution by which to help the whole of this earth that we live in flourish and survive, because we're about that. That's what the Christian faith is all about, being connected to the true source of all life, which is Christ, and that is in his whole creation.